Hello and welcome to my channel. It's no secret that there is a serious mental health problem, not only in America, but happening globally. So who can you turn to? What sort of techniques and practices can you utilize to try to heal yourself rather than dabbling in pharmaceuticals, expensive therapy, or some other modality that may be inaccessible to many? Many of you have likely heard the term shadow work, but what actually is it? And what tools can you utilize to apply shadow work to facilitate your own healing? I'm joined by Ody Andreanos, life coach and shadow work specialist, to dive deep into this fascinating and very essential topic. Let's get into it. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Wizard Factory podcast, where together we explore the universe through ourselves. I'm your host, Logan Hart. In today's episode, we have a very special guest, Ody Andreanos, where we're going to be diving into the amazing topic and much needed topic of shadow work and self-healing. So before we get started, do me a favor and hit the like button and subscribe if you're on YouTube, and hit that bell notification to never miss a video. If you're on the podcast platform, give us a follow real quick so you get to see every new episode coming out. So Ody, welcome to the show, man.
Pleasure to be here, man. I'm really grateful to talk about this powerful topic.
I'm excited to get into it. It's something we haven't really gone too in depth with here on the show, and I definitely think healing is an area that needs to be given a lot of focus, a lot more focus than I think a lot of people in certain aspects of. I've noticed it's kind of like two sides of the spectrum where maybe the new age side of things tends to really, they do look at healing a lot and sort of the yoga and energy work and the more spiritual side of things, but then they're not really looking much at the darker side, say, conspiracy stuff or even like occulted knowledge going into the more esoteric sciences. And so I'd love to see more of a synthesis between those two worlds, and they're not so segregated from each other.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, I totally feel you on the dark side of stuff. And the dark side isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's like, just to share a little bit about my background, like when I was a little boy, my father worked on the movie Revenge of the Jedi. And it's a perfect analogy. He's look at Star Wars and how Luke Skywalker had to face his father, and his father was succumb to the dark side. And so I think that his realization of who he was as a Jedi was facing his father and facing his shadow and facing the dark side. Like when he was trained by Yoda, he had to face his own unconscious in these dreams when he was out in I forget what planet it was. But yeah, there's like some beautiful stories within stories that can really kind of awaken us to our true potential. And that's not going to happen until we face our dark side. And I totally feel you on like the spiritual communities that are trying to be all like, everything is love and light. We're all light workers. And the truth is, if you're really going to know your light, you have to know your darkness. And the basis of a lot of shadow work comes from Jungian psychology. And if you go way back, a lot of shadow work was really taught in mystery schools back in the day, and now it's coming out because it's a massive tool for people being able to heal themselves. And when we talk about healing, the word to heal just means to make whole. It's essentially integrating aspects of our psyche that have been repressed, suppressed, or denied. And when you do that work, I mean, like, that's why I love teaching this stuff, because it's literally like magic. I mean, this is the Wizard Factory, right? So it's literally like magic, because when you are repressing, suppressing, and denying certain aspects of your psyche, you are not a whole and complete person. And one of the things I love most about teaching this stuff and sharing this wisdom is that as you do this work, this shadow work, you begin to integrate those repressed aspects. And then you do what's called awakening your shadow. And probably the most beautiful piece is that at the goal at the end of the tunnel is that you stop wasting energy repressing all of those emotions and whatnot. And instead of repressing that stuff, instead of your shadow being your saboteur, you renegotiate with your shadow and it becomes your guide. And then you become a whole and complete person, and your life becomes a lot easier. So just a little bit of a nuggets of what's to come with what we're talking about today. But that's really what this is all about, is becoming a whole and complete person.
Absolutely. Yeah, we recently touched on that with the episode with Leslie Powers, who's a clinical therapist, and we went into that very thing, making yourself whole again. That's a very important way to look at this whole process, because how can you ever realize your full potential if you can't even access your full and embody your fullest self? Like, those things are you don't even have access to those things. You've like closed and compartmentalized them off. So yeah, great stuff. Good very introduction there. So I'd love to start by kind of getting into your background, maybe some about your upbringing, but then talk about your work as a coach and how that journey led you into really focusing in on the shadow work stuff.
Yeah, so just as I kind of mentioned, my father worked in Hollywood when I was a child. He was actually George Lucas's sound mixer when I was a young boy, which was really cool, but kind of traumatizing in some ways, because I would go to work with him and like he worked on Howard the Duck. So I'd be around like strange duck people. And so like I'm a little boy and I'm around these like animatronics and crazy wild creatures and stuff. So I was exposed to a lot of interesting things, to say the least, when I was a little boy. My father worked on like the Wonder Years, so I grew up around a lot of really successful entrepreneurs. I grew up around world-class coaches when I was a young boy. But one of the weird things is, growing up, I got to see how film production was made. You know, and as I mentioned, this is the Wizard Factory. I mean, the word Hollywood, actually, the term actually comes from a magician's wand is made of holy wood. Most people don't realize that. And there is definitely a dark side to Hollywood, from a standpoint of, that's why I'm so keen to teaching this work, because if you don't know how your subconscious or unconscious mind works, and you're sitting here watching TV, it can literally be programming your subconscious or unconscious mind. We'll get into what those terms mean as we progress through this. But the key point here is, I was like a little boy, and my dad was filming like a Coca-Cola commercial, and I'm like, I think I was like 8 or 9 or 10 years old. And I'm like, why are they filming it like this? They got this beautiful woman with her boobies hanging out. She's like, this Coca-Cola is delicious. And she's like, ah. I'm like, why are they filming it like that? And I didn't know what brainwashing was at that point. But I started realizing, oh, they're brainwashing people to think that they're going to get more sex. They're going to be happier if they drink Coca-Cola. And we all know that Coca-Cola is not really that good for you because of all the sugar. But the key point is that it's programming people's subconscious mind, and your subconscious mind only works on images. So you have these images in your mind of, quote unquote, what happiness means. And so you're going to go out and you're actually going to attempt to reenact the things that you see on TV. And it's actually like an empty realm of happiness, where you're just consuming sugar, you're getting diabetes, or like you see people, like, it's not the same as it was when we were younger, but on people on movies, like smoking cigarettes and stuff and doing all kinds of unhealthy habits, but it's like integrated into your psyche. Like, I remember growing up watching TV, it's like you see someone, they get stressed out and they would go and smoke a cigarette. So like it became like a program for people. They get stressed out and they would go smoke a cigarette. And no judgment if you smoke cigarettes, but it's part of the programming. That's the key point here, understanding how the subconscious mind works. And as I mentioned, the subconscious mind only works on images. And so as you learn to navigate your subconscious mind, you can begin to shift how your conscious reality is being manifested. And that, like I said, is the magic behind this. And the people who make movies and TV shows, they know this, because they can program masses of people's minds in terms of how they're going to habituate how people are living their lives. Now, fast forward to as I grew up, I went to San Diego State University, got my degree in kinesiology, and I was a teenager before that, and I was like, wait, I can be a fitness coach and just kind of beat the system and just teach people how to exercise. And I was like, I'm all in. So I dedicated my life to becoming a fitness coach. Like I said, I got my degree in kinesiology, and I got multiple fitness certifications. My degree had an emphasis in nutrition and health, which was awesome. So I have this great background in nutrition and health. But I opened my first gym at 24 years old, and eventually I opened a second corporate gym with a 9-figure company, which I still work with them today. I'm actually doing a corporate diet challenge with them soon. And after years and years of being really successful, built a 6-figure coaching business. You know, we talk about being successful in business, and but after years of that, you know, and I made great money, helped lots of people. Something inside me just something was off. Something was off, like in my gut. And I began to realize, you know, I could teach people the perfect exercise program. I could teach you the perfect diet program, you know, but like, if you're still struggling unconsciously with loving yourself, you're not going to get the lasting results that you want. I started to notice, because I built this system and it worked really well. Because like I said, I opened 2 gyms, and some people be taking off, getting amazing results. and then other people wouldn't. And I took it personally for, what am I doing wrong here? I got to figure out a new way to do the system. Then as I got deeper, I realized that it was people's emotions.
Mm.
And the more I got into that, the more I got into studying, and then I started to expose myself to other coaches. I started getting into shadow work. Like I was teaching shadow work before I knew what it was, because I would sit there with my clients and have really deep conversations about what was going on emotionally. Because, you could exercise and eat healthy, but if you're struggling with repressed emotions, those repressed emotions are going to be what's running your life unconsciously. And so going through that process was beautiful, because I had a lot of experience, like literally 20,000 hours of coaching experience, where I got to practice teaching everything that I learned in my shadow work stuff. So that's what made me so successful as a fitness coach, because I wasn't actually doing fitness. I was more of like a life coach / shadow work coach, which is what I'm doing now. But the key point is that I realized that it's not so much what's going on consciously. Like, I can make your butt look good and give you the perfect diet, but if your head's still full of crap, you're not going to live a fulfilling life. So that's the essence of my teaching now, is showing people how to face their unconscious emotional wounds and access that material and integrate it so they can live a more complete life. And literally, it's like breaking the chains from your past and living the life that you've always deserved to live. I always tell people, it's not what you want, it's what you deserve. And when you're in alignment with that, everything is so much more abundant in your life. So that's a little bit of my background, and I love teaching it, because it's just so impactful, seeing how people's lives change in such a massive way. And it literally can take just as little as a few months, and everything can shift for you if you're willing to do the work.
Absolutely. So you started as a fitness coach, and you noticed the results were different for different people, and so you kind of started diving and digging into that, and that's what led you down the path of of like mindset, as we talk a lot about on here. All is mind, the principle of mentalism. And so how did you come across the concept of shadow work specifically? And was it like a light bulb as soon as you found it, you were like, this is what I'm looking for? Or was it more of a process of kind of trial and error with that?
So I worked with a range of coaches who exposed me to it. And one of the things that this one coach told me, he said that the first thing he does with people is shadow work. It's like, there's no point in even doing any other stuff until you find those repressed emotions, because you give people all these tools, but if they still have an unconscious repressed or suppressed emotion, they will not get the results that they want. And another key point that I wanted to mention too is that I realized that the emotions actually get embedded in our physiology. The emotions get embedded in our physiology. Like I said, I have a degree in kinesiology. And so seeing how people's bodies were moving or not moving really came down to understanding what the healing process was all about. Because when you get people to do this work, they're able to shift that emotional frequency, and then that sets them free from the blocked emotions and how it's specifically affecting their nervous system. But yeah, I mean, the key point was like, for me, like recognizing where I had to do my own shadow work too. It's like, if you're going to be an authentic coach, you got to do your own work too. So I started going into facing my own stuff. Like, as I mentioned, my father worked in Hollywood, which is cool, but my dad worked crazy hours. So I found that I had, in my own shadow work, I had this anger. And I was like, where is this anger coming from? A lot of men have struggles with anger because they're suppressing or repressing those emotions. And once I got into the anger was really the surface level emotion. As I worked through that anger, I found that there was actually fear. And as I began to access that fear, I went even deeper, and I found that it was abandonment. And I had this unconscious story of abandonment. And that was because my father was gone so much as a child growing up. And so navigating the shadow realm really helped me to get clear on what my internal issue was. And that set me free from like creating situations where I was abandoning myself in my conscious day-to-day life. And an example of this would be, like I've read this before in Shadowwork books, where it's like, say you grew up in a family where you had parents that would shame you to control you. Like, you're seeking love, you're like a little boy or girl, like, oh, I just want to be loved. And you're trying to receive love from your parents, and you get shamed, and you get shamed, and you get shamed. And your unconscious goes, oh, to be loved, I have to experience shame. And it's like it's in your physiology. So then you're an adult and you're out like trying to date, and you keep attracting people who shame you. And you're like, why is this happening to me? What's going on? And like, people get stuck in victim mode. They think there's something wrong with them. This actually is the root cause of many mental health problems. And the mental health problems are really coming down to the fact that there's repressed emotions. And until you face that shame or that guilt or whatever repressed emotion it is internally, you're going to keep seeing it externally. Just like you mentioned, like the law of mentalism, it's the law of correspondence, as within, so without. So when you don't face it internally, you're going to keep experiencing it externally. And egos don't like to hear this because it's not the ego that's the issue. It's really the shadow that needs to be honored. It needs to be integrated, and that awakens you to your truest potential. And that's why I love talking about this stuff, because it's literally like magic once you actually do this work. Because when you're not consistently attracting people who shame you or make you feel guilt or make you feel grief or make you feel abandoned, that's when you start attracting people who allow you to live the life of your dreams.
Absolutely. It really is inner alchemy. So, and I'm really glad
Yes.
to hear you say the comment about it's not the ego that's the problem, it's the shadow, because really, of course, semantics always can be the issue, but me personally, I don't like demonizing the ego, because I say your ego is really just yourself, your sense of self, and all the components that make you you as an individual. That's not inherently bad. It's just that when we have these traumas that are affecting our choices, our beliefs about ourselves, and things like that, it causes these erratic behaviors. It's coming from the ego, but it's not, it's like saying, like, because your car is broken, cars are bad. Well, no, it's just that that car has some issues that need to be worked out. But once you do, then it becomes a healthy, autonomous being again, and that's the goal ultimately. It's very interesting stuff.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned the demons thing, because it's like it's not actually the ego, it's the suppressed and repressed and denied emotions in our unconscious. So what happens is the more that you suppress, repress, and deny these emotions, they like show up like a demon, but it's not your ego, it's the repressed shadow that needs to be honored, felt, and integrated. And so like when we say like a demon, it's really like, let's say you've been repressing your anger and then you get triggered and the anger comes out in really ugly ways. Well, it's because you've been repressing, suppressing, and denying it. And as you mentioned, it's not so much the ego, it's the repressed aspect of your psyche. Let me say that again. It's the repressed aspects of your psyche. And as you integrate those repressed aspects, or like in Western psychology, talk about it's disassociated aspects of the psyche. This is a lot of what's causing so many people to go on psychiatric drugs or having to go see a therapist for years doing like cognitive behavioral therapy, is because they're repressing, suppressing, and denying emotions. Like my whole goal being a coach teaching this is if we teach people the system for how our emotions work, how they show up in the body, we can literally learn to become our own healer. That's the essence of all the stuff that I'm teaching. It's extremely simple. I mean, it's complex, but very simple. If we learn to become our own healer, then we don't need to have so many prescription drugs. We don't need to go see the therapist as often. We don't need to see the doctor as much, because our physiology isn't storing those emotions. Our nervous system isn't having blockages. Like I'm really into Taoist philosophy too. And a lot of like the Taoist philosophy is like you're talking about is alchemizing. It's really about harmonizing our left and right hemispheres of the brain, harmonizing our mind and our body. And a lot of that happens through opening up our hearts. Many people are walking around with a closed heart, and that's what's causing a lot of the problems in their lives, because they're not feeling their heart. And what's the leading killer in America? Heart disease, because we're blocking our hearts and feeling and expressing our emotions. And that's why the stuff I'm teaching, I'm so keen to sharing it with as many people in the world as possible, because it's such powerful wisdom and can, like I said, teach you how to become your own healer.
Yes, it really does all come back down to know thyself. And when you know thyself, not only are you much more empowered because you actually have the tools when your self is broken to put yourself back together, but then you're not making yourself susceptible to other people that claim to know yourself better than you do, and may have goals that aren't in alignment with your best interest, and then they can exploit that by your vulnerability and your ignorance of thyself. And that's what's happening with the epidemic of prescription pills and codependent, never-ending therapy and things like that. So yeah, let's talk a bit about the mental illness epidemic, because that's really
Yeah.
the driving force behind what all this comes down to. And I'm sure you would say that your goal is to make it to where you're not needed anymore. What you do is not needed anymore, because people can then go on to heal themselves, or they've already healed themselves in the aggregate, and we're not having this epidemic anymore. So yeah, what do you think is the main cause of this trauma that's causing all these issues in people?
Well, it's kind of like our society doesn't teach you how to balance a checkbook. It doesn't really teach you about finances. And that's kind of the external world. In the internal world, I really feel that most of our mental illness challenges really come down to the fact that it's essentially emotional illness. And when we have that emotional illness, I'll give you an example here. So there's this great doctor. He's no longer alive. His name's Dr. Thurman Fleet. And one of the things he talks about, since we've been mentioning like natural law and whatnot, is he said it all comes down to cause and effect. And most people, the cause of most mental illness is emotions. The effects are showing up as psychological problems or mental illness. Because what happens is like, let's say you have like a problem with your back, your lower back, and it's because you're sulking, your shoulders are closed up, you're walking around because you're so sad. No one ever taught you how to manage your emotions, so you have back pain, and you're going to like a chiropractor, and the chiropractor is doing adjustments, which is totally cool. But like he's just dealing with effects. That's what often doctors are doing. They're dealing with effects. They're not dealing with the root cause. So what happens is you're going to the chiropractor and you're trying to get your back fixed, and like oh, you do these treatments, and so like it works for a short period of time, but you never face the root cause. It's like you got weeds growing in your backyard and you keep mowing your lawn, but you never pulled the weed out at the root. So what happens is that people are just dealing with effects, and they're not actually working with the root causes. And this is what's causing them to have mental illness, because you have like a physiological problem, and then it turns into a mental health problem. It's like, why am I not healing? There's something wrong with me. But all along, it was really an emotional problem, because most people don't understand how their emotions work. And that's the essence of my teaching, is when we learn how our emotions work. We talk about, like, say, the trivium method. Like, it's all about the wisdom. How? When I talk about like NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, it's really like, what is the blueprint that's running people's reality? They say in the NLP that the map is not the territory. And when people are triggered, their map from their past, right here, I like having it dark behind me because it's like a shadow. It's like this map from your past when you were a little boy. All of a sudden you're triggered, and that map comes out, and you are no longer present. You are no longer conscious. You are operating from your unconscious. You're like, Logan, you made me so angry. You're making me so sad. It's like, it's really like, Logan, you didn't make me angry or sad. You just triggered the part of myself that hasn't faced my emotional pain. So now I'm running this internal operating system, which is essentially an unconscious blueprint of my reality. And they say the map is not the territory. So it's not what's actually happening. And I'm using this old map to navigate my reality, which is actually just causing me to become more sick. It's causing me to project my anger at you. You're the reason I'm angry, Logan. It's your fault. But it's really me not facing my internal emotional pain. And like, one of the things that when I say that I absolutely love about teaching this wisdom, is that it helps so many families deal with emotional pain in families. Like me, like we'll talk about like my book and like learning this for myself, and like I got plenty of trauma in my family, but I can talk about trauma now. I can have a conversation about emotions. I've had clients who worked with me, and they told me that now they know how to have a stronger vocabulary to express their emotional pain. They can have a conversation with their mother, their father, their brother, their uncle, their cousin, their coworkers, and express themselves authentically, have stronger boundaries. And that is so powerfully healing. And coming back to the point that we're talking about, that's the root cause of most of the mental illness. It's because people don't know how to communicate their emotions. So they just repress, suppress, and deny them. And then those unconscious emotions are running their lives, driving the mental health problems. People are numbing their pain with opiates and whatnot. But in reality, they just need some support. Like, one of my visions is to build like a tribe of coaches and healers where we can get out there and start building more facilities where we can teach this wisdom to more people. Because as we do this work, we learn the tools of how our emotions work. Like I said, it's like a blueprint. Then we can learn to become our own healer. And that is absolutely magical. The more people we get this wisdom to, the better, because then we don't need as many prescription drugs. We don't need to go to the doctor as much. We don't need to go see a therapist as much. In my coaching, usually like within 3 to 6 months, people will shift completely, and then their entire life changes because they've reintegrated those repressed emotions. And like I said, that's the magic of all this. And like you said, it's essentially alchemy. Like Jungian psychology, he was really into alchemy. He saw it as the future of psychology, is because you're alchemized repressed aspects of your psyche, and it's turning what's metal into gold and that which is mental into gold. And that cannot be stressed enough. What's metal into gold and what's mental. It's those base level emotions like the lead, and you're transmuting into gold. And that's the essence of my teaching, man. Like I blend Taoist alchemy into my coaching practice to share this stuff with people, because I really feel personally the future of health, healing, medicine, coaching really has to do with our emotions and our nervous system. People are getting sick and they're going, like, I got a client I'm working with right now. He's been going to all these Western doctors. Like, he's got like a nerve thing. Can't figure out what it is. So I'm teaching him this like Taoist alchemy stuff to help him to calm his nervous system down. Because when the nervous system is calm, then you can actually heal. And that's extremely powerful.
Love that. I like the metal and the mental connection. That's really cool. I've never thought of that. So now that we've kind of painted the picture, we've set the stage for everything. Tell me how you would define shadow work in terms of the work, the actual application of these principles and the ideas that we've been discussing. How would you basically define the process itself? And then I'd like to get into some tools and techniques that people can use after that. But first, just define what it is.
Totally, man. And what I do is I use this analogy because like a lot of it really comes down to the images that we hold within ourselves of like who we are and how we're operating within the space-time continuum. So essentially, the way I explain this is I use this analogy of a boat. And a boat is a perfect analogy because it's like you're heading towards this island destination. And my buddy Derek just texted me. He says, "What's up?" By the way. So you're on this boat and you're heading towards this island destination. The island destination could be you want to lose weight, get in shape, find true love, make more money, maybe go to an island destination. Years ago, I had a vision to go traveling, and I did 5 trips to Southeast Asia. So like that was an example of how I applied it to my own life. But you're on this boat and you want to make this goal happen. Let's say like it's attract love into your life. Because I used that analogy earlier, like shame, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you're fighting the current, and the current is the subconscious mind. Everything above the surface is your conscious mind. You're like, wow, I've set the sail. I'm rowing really fast. I got the propeller going. So you're heading, like, I'm heading towards my goal. I'm going to find true love. I'm doing all these things right. I'm on these dating apps or something, right? But if you have a subconscious image of not being worthy of love, my feelings aren't valid, I'm stupid, I'm ugly, I'm a victim. And those unconscious beliefs, or excuse me, subconscious beliefs, are you're fighting that current, you can row your freaking butt off. That's why I love teaching this, because people are wasting so much energy fighting that current of the subconscious mind. Now what happens is people aren't just fighting the current, because the current is the subconscious. Then there's also what's even deeper, which is the unconscious. So we have the conscious mind above the surface, the subconscious mind is the current, and the unconscious is essentially people who are sitting on the back of the boat. They're looking at their past and they're saying, well, I am who I am because my mother dropped me when I was a child. I am who I am because I was abused. And so they have this story, and they're not even, where's the boat going? Because they're sitting on the back of the boat using the wake of the ship, which is slowly disappearing, to define where they are. And what's even deeper, this is where we're really getting into the unconscious, is they've thrown anchors into the water, maybe multiple anchors, and they've hooked onto a rock deep below the surface. And that's where it's like the unconscious. Like I said, the subconscious is you fighting the current. The conscious is above the surface. The unconscious is deep, way below the surface, where you're anchored onto these stories, or this, like the unconscious mind is not logical. It's like a blob or a shape. It's like abstract art. And you're locked onto this like belief of being a victim or unworthy of love. And you're essentially just going in circles. Like, why am I not attracting the life that I deserve? Well, it's because you're unconsciously, when they say it again, unconsciously attached to this story of like who you are. And that can be like something that was passed down in your family, right? And so what happens is, this is like, I use this analogy to explain it. It's like as you go through this process of shadow work, we learn how to get you off the back of the boat, acknowledge those anchors, pull them back on board, or cut them if necessary. And as you do that, then you're able to shift that current of the subconscious mind, and then you get to your dreams with the fraction of the effort. And that's where it's like magic. It's like you learn to become your own wizard, because you're actually learning. This is why, like I said, it's all about teaching this wisdom to people, because that analogy I just used of the boat, I've been using that for years, just teaching people how to change their diet. Because it's like you could be like exercising, eating healthy, but you could still be sabotaging yourself. And so kind of getting into like some of the tools of shadow work, it's about recognizing those unconscious beliefs and stories. So like when you get triggered, right? Something triggers you. What's the meaning that comes up? What's the emotion that arises? What are the self-sabotaging behaviors? So it's like a spiral. You get triggered, you create meaning, there's an emotion, there's a behavior. Trigger, meaning, emotion, behavior. And so people, when they're unconscious, they're slowly spiraling out of control. They get triggered, they create the same meaning. I'm not worthy of love. And they feel sad, and they go, I'm gonna go eat a bunch of ice cream, it'll make me feel better. And I'm trying to make it funny. But like people, they're just spiraling out of control until they get clear on what's triggering them. What is the trigger, right? Then what is the meaning I'm creating? The real change happens at the emotional level. What is the emotion that keeps arising from the unconscious? And then the behaviors begin to change. And I'm simplifying it a lot. This takes time for different people. The more deeply embedded those unconscious stories are, the more difficult it is to change. But as we navigate the unconscious, we start to find like, oh, that's where the emotion is. Then we can begin to work with that emotion rather than fighting it. And you don't heal on your ego's terms. You heal on your shadow's terms. You don't like go into shadow and say, I got a lot of stuff to do, shadow. I got to get going, and like tell your shadow, like, I got to do this. Oftentimes it takes time. It's just like working out. It takes reps of getting in there and working with those unconscious emotions and healing on their terms. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, that absolutely makes a lot of sense. And I love that analogy about the ship. It makes sense why you've been using it for so long, because that really gives you that visual of, first of all, there's a lot of layers to the mind. It's not just you in there. There's
Yeah.
your knowledge, there's your emotions, there's your belief system, the conscious, the subconscious, the unconscious. There's, and this is very esoteric even, and a lot of people don't know about this stuff. I also love that you can see beautifully depicted the trivium, where it all starts with your beliefs and your knowledge and your perception of things, and everything else stems from that. And if that part is not correct, is not in alignment with truth, then your outcomes will always be stunted until you get your mind right, right? Like, it's basic stuff,
Yes.
but our minds are not right in so many ways. So this work is so vital and crucial. Hey guys, hope you're enjoying the episode so far. I just want to take a quick moment to offer you a special gift. It's the free initiation package download. This is a free download package that includes the Toolbox mini course. I created this package to equip you with all of the essential tools you need for any type of energetic or magical practice for anyone serious about their spiritual development. It's comprised of 3 parts: the circle, the breath, and the voice, where you'll learn how to cast the circle of the Magi, various breathwork techniques, including a powerful guided breathwork meditation, rune galler, and more. You'll also get access to the Inner Sanctum, our private Facebook group and Discord server, as well as some Wizard Factory wallpapers for desktop and mobile, all for free. And for those who've already seen this course, I'm happy to announce that this is a brand new remake with better production and even more information. You can find the link to get yours in the description below. So check it out, and let's get back to the content. Absolutely. So getting into that, the work, now that we got a clearer picture of what this actual process is, how do we do that? What is some of the most effective techniques that the viewers can actually start working on and using themselves to do this?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing I wanted to say is you triggered me in a beautiful way to some of the stuff that I've been thinking about. The analogy of the ship, I actually have a free gift that I give away to people. It's called the SHIP, Shadow Hacker Initiation Package. And it's just one of my free tools that, like, if people are interested and want to learn a little more about Shadowwork and get some basic tools, I share this SHIP, Shadow Hacker Initiation Package. And I send that to people who are interested. So if you have any interest, please feel free to reach out to me so I can send that to you, because it goes along with the analogy of the boat, right? So that's kind of like my tool for kind of leading into that. But in terms of the beginning tools, I really feel the first tool, and this is what I share in the SHIP package, is that it's really about grounding yourself. And when I say grounding yourself, it's really about getting your nervous system calm. So we talk about tools. The first step is grounding yourself. Just like an electrical circuit, it has to be grounded. So like most people, like they're too much in their heads. They're not in their bodies enough. And like even I'm working on this too. I've been working on this for years, but I still work on my mind. Like my girlfriend, she's an astrologer. She's like, Ody, you're a quadruple air sign. You're like really in your head, which is beautiful, but you got to be grounded.
Mm-hmm.
So specifically for me,
I'm the same
when
way.
I talk about being grounded, yeah, for sure, man. But like in terms of like Taoist alchemy, the earth element is associated. Well, the earth element actually feeds the metal element. Okay, I'm talking about 5-element theory. I'm not going to get too deep into that. But the more you ground yourself to the earth, within the earth, you find gold, precious metals. We're talking about alchemy again here. It's like, why am I not manifesting the money that I want? It's like, you're not grounded, right? So the more you ground yourself to the earth, the gold is found within you. Now, a famous book, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, one of the best written, like most read books in history. I've read it 5 times. Think and Grow Rich said more gold has been mined from the mind of man than any cave in the world. Because you think about it, like an artist could like take a random piece of paper and create some beautiful masterpiece, and it could be worth millions. So if we start to talk about the alchemy and how it applies to shadow work, it's about how can I deeply ground myself? Because your nervous system, it looks like a root system. Mm-hmm. So when your nervous system is calm, talk about calm and deeply grounded, thoughts start coming into your mind, because when we talk about alchemy, masculine energy is electric, feminine energy is magnetic. And so as we calm ourselves down, okay, that's when we start to activate that magnetic feminine or yin frequency. Okay, like I said, talking about Taoist alchemy, yin and yang. And when that yin frequency becomes very calm, then our bodies become like an antenna. We start to attract new thoughts, new people, new things into our life. So the first step, as I said a couple of times now, is grounding yourself. Taking the time to step away from your linear consciousness mind. And as you ground yourself, but this is one of the first things that I teach, is getting out of the linear consciousness mind and activating what's called a quantum state of mind. Because in a quantum state of mind, there's infinite possibility available to you right now in this moment. But you're not going to see it when you're addicted to your linear level of consciousness. And when I say linear, it's a Newtonian, Cartesian, linear model of consciousness where you're using your past to create your future. Joe Dispenza talks about this. I mean, a lot of like elite coaches, doctors, and therapists who are keen to this stuff, they're talking about this stuff, because most people, they're living in a linear, third-dimensional Newtonian model of consciousness, where they're like, well, Logan, you don't understand. I am who I am because of my past. And this comes right to the boat analogy. People sitting on the back of the boat saying, well, I am who I am because of my past, but like, where's the boat going, right? So like I said, the key point is getting yourself super calm. And just to kind of come back to the analogy of the water, yang energy is like moving water. And there's nothing wrong with yang masculine energy. It's moving water. It's more linear. But when you calm yourself down and ground yourself, the water becomes calm. Your body is made of water. And when that water becomes very calm, then you can see a reflection in the water. You can see below the surface of the water. And essentially, you're seeing a new reflection of yourself. You're seeing what's really going on deep below the surface of where those anchors are keeping you stuck in your past. And as you do that, that gives you introspection into what is really holding you back in your life. And as you begin to access that space of the unconscious, then you start to heal yourself. But you have to have that introspection. The first and last thing that I always tell people when I'm teaching shadow work, the first step is awareness. The last step is awareness. But as you progress through this process of shadow work, shadow integration, and awakening your shadow, that's essentially how I break it down in 3 steps. Even when you've awakened your shadow, you still have to have that awareness, because even when you've done this work, you're still going to trigger other people, and you're going to realize like, oh, I've triggered this person. Now their shadow's coming out. But because you've done your inner work, they're not going to mess up your game. They're not going to mess up your energy because you've done your inner work. Like, especially like the people that we love. People that we love tend to trigger us the most. Mm-hmm. But one other thing I was going to say in terms of like the trivium method and language arts is, I always say that the language arts are like martial arts. People are literally karate chopping themselves. And words, get into like some wizard word magic here. If you take the word words and you add the letter S to the front, it becomes swords.
Yep.
And so what people are doing, like the first thing I do, as I mentioned, my father was a sound mixer in Hollywood. And this is like my gift, I guess you could say, as a coach, is I'm really great at listening. Like my father's a multiple-time Emmy nominee for the world's best sound mixer. And so my father taught me at a young age that if you look at the word heart, right? And your Logan heart, right? So if you look at the word heart, if you look at the center of the word, it's EAR, it's your ear. And if you look at the band, it's like to hear. So if you really deeply listen to people, like when I'm coaching people, I listen to if you take both ears and you put them together, it's the shape of a heart. So when you deeply listen to people, it's not what they say, it's how they say it. And we talked about like how is essentially the rhetoric or the wisdom. So it's the rate, the pitch, the tone, the inflection of people's words and the power words that people use to describe their reality. What this does is when I'm coaching people, it gives me the introspection to begin to see what's going on deep below the surface, because those words reveal how the unconscious mind is manifesting in their conscious reality. And this is where, it's, like I said, it's like magic, because I can literally, I've been coaching 20 years, 20,000 hours. I've done this so much. And then, like I said, my gift for listening, I can listen to people talk, and within like a few minutes, I can pick them apart in the loving way to find what's really going on below the surface. And as we do that, I just kind of mirror to people the things that they're not seeing within themselves. And as I do that, that gives them the introspection to see how their language structure is actually manifesting their reality. I'll give you an example. I did an intro session with a lady 2 months ago. She was actually on the verge of taking prescription drugs for anxiety. And she was like, I was going to either take drugs or I was going to hire you. And I don't want to be on drugs, so I hired you to help me out. And I was like, sweet. Like, I want to get people off pills. And we were on this call, and she was describing her life. And I was like sitting there taking notes. And she used the word hard. It's hard. This is hard. I'm having such a hard time. Hard, hard, hard. And towards the end of the call, I was like, you used the word hard 17 times in this call. And she was like, what? I'm like, yeah, because your unconscious mind is perceiving things as hard. And it like blew her mind because she wasn't even conscious. And when I talked to her about it, I was like, hard, essentially, hard is really a density. There's a density. And this is part of like the addiction to who you think you are. So like, because your ego is like, well, this is who I am. It's like, I'm who I am because I identify with my past. But you identifying with your past could be you identifying with your trauma unconsciously. And that unconscious trauma is running your life, keeping you attracting people who shame you, like my example, or keep attracting people who allow you to continuously would live it externally because you didn't face it internally, as within, so without, the law of correspondence. And the more you keep living that experience, people get addicted, hormonally addicted to that experience. This is why, you can do this work on your own, but this is why hiring a coach and getting a support is so crucial, because they're going to see things and hear things that you're not examining or not experiencing in your reality. And this allows you to have the discernment to begin to navigate your reality with greater ease, because you're able to have the introspection and awareness around what emotions are actually running your life from the unconscious mind. And that comes back to, like I said, the words, because the language structure is like a spell. When people go to prison, they get a sentence. So some people are creating a prison in their own minds through their own sentences. That's why when I'm coaching people, I'm listening to like, how are they creating their reality? Are they unconsciously sabotaging themselves? And how is the shadow showing up running their lives? So these are some of the beginning tools that you can utilize. If you're going to do it on your own, and just like a quick plug for my book, Shadow Awaken, it's a do-it-yourself process where you can actually take this book, do it on your own. It's only $15. I'm not trying to be salesy. I don't make a lot of money off this. I want to make it affordable for anybody to do this work. But the key point here is it's actually a workbook. So you can start writing down what's coming up for you and start to actually create that introspection into what's going on in your unconscious mind. And as I mentioned, that's how you become more whole, because you was like, oh, this repressed emotion is what's really going on running my life. And then that's what allows you to start shifting things, because you move things from the unconscious to the subconscious, which is based on images, and then to your conscious mind. And then you can start to like change that direction of the ship, let go of those anchors, change the current, and then boom, now you're like literally become like a magnet. The current takes you to your goals with a fraction of the effort. That's why I love teaching this stuff so much, because it's like literally, it's like magic. It's like you're becoming your own wizard and you're manifesting your dreams like a wizard. And that's what's so powerful about this work. And that's why, like why shadow work, I believe it's one of the most powerful tools that people can apply to their lives in terms of becoming their own healer. Because as you do this work, you begin to manifest with greater ease. Like, why am I not manifesting? It's like, well, because you have these unconscious blocks. So how is this all landing for you? I know I said a lot there, but hopefully it's making sense.
It's making sense. I'd like to drill into more, though. So we've kind of talked about the phases. First, you have to calm down the nervous system. I would assume that that would be things like meditation, breath work, things that get you into your
Yes.
sympathetic nervous system. And then from there, what would be kind of some of the techniques? I know maybe journaling. What are some other ones that one
Yes.
can kind of get to the roots of these beliefs?
Yes. So you're 100% correct. Some of the tools that I provide people is I have different breath work recordings, like some like DMT style, like Wim Hof things that allow you to get out of your, get to calm the nervous system down, then doing some meditation techniques, introspection, because that's what really, you want to activate the vagus nerve, which drops you into that rest and recovery mode. Because if you're in fight or flight mode, you're going to be just operating almost unconsciously. So as you calm the nervous system down, the key point, as I mentioned earlier, is that in the unconscious mind, things are not logical. It's like a blob or a shape. It's like abstract art. It's like melting clocks. And so as you begin to feel into that space, right? As you begin to feel into that space, you can begin to access like, oh, there it is. Like for me, like a few years ago when I started getting into breath work, my mother was actually going through cancer. And I kid you not, man, I started doing breath work and I would come out of that breath work and I would be weeping like a little boy, like seeing my mother lose all of her hair and just being so worried about my mother and the sickness she was going through. And what I did was utilizing the breath work with the shadow work. I was able to cry in such a way that I was able to like get out of my logical mind and really drop into that emotional space and find the unconscious material that was really holding me back. And in accessing that space, that allowed me to access, like I said, the unconscious material, which is like a blob or a shape. And as I access that, I'm like, oh, there it is. Like, that's the emotion. And when I say it, that's the emotion. It's not logical. It's like a feeling. You can actually find it like in your body, within your physio, like, oh, that's where I'm feeling it. And as you begin to work with this is where we talk about like the Taoist philosophy of like what's called the three Dantians, your Jing, your Qi, and your Shen. And like we all heard, most people have heard of Qi. You have like blocked Qi within the body and you'll feel those areas. Like often people are like, why do I have this back pain? It's like, because you have blocked areas within the body. And as you feel into those areas and then mitigate like how those emotions are stuck, then you can start shifting them from that unconscious space. And then you'll start to like, the image will arise of like when you were abused as a child. In modern psychology, I believe it is the book right here, Peter Levine talks about a term called pendulation. Okay. So what you're doing, the key point here, I'm talking about tools, right? Is that it's really important that you stay present in the here and now. But what you do is you pendulate, and this is like kind of like the law of rhythm, right? You're able to pendulate into like, what is this past experience? Stay present, but pendulate into your past of like what you experienced. And what this does is it allows you to reintegrate that repressed emotional frequency into your consciousness. So the beginning of shadow work is doing this work to calm the nervous system down, using the breath work, meditation, like you mentioned, journaling. So you calm your body down enough so you're able to access that unconscious space. That's the beginning points of shadow work. So you're working with your shadow. You're renegotiating with your shadow. You're creating a relationship with your shadow, because often people have been repressing, suppressing, and denying these aspects of their psyche. And psyche actually means soul in Greek, by the way. As you do that, we are working with the, like, oh, that's the thing. I've repressed shame. Then we start to work with the integration process. We begin to reintegrate that shame into our psyche. So we face it internally. As we face it internally, as within, so without, right? Then we're able to shift the vibrational frequency associated with that emotion. So instead of vibrating from that space of shame unconsciously, we begin to face it, renegotiate with it. Now, what do I mean by renegotiate? There's this one exercise that I teach. It's called feeding your demons. And essentially you sit there and, like, long story short, you create an actual dialogue with these wounded aspects of yourself. And you do almost in essence a form of role playing. This is based on an ancient Buddhist principle called chut. So this is some of my deeper wisdom that I teach. And as you work with that, you renegotiate with this part of your psyche. Like, what do you need? What do you want? And as you're in that deep space of calmness, you're able to negotiate with that part of yourself. It tells you what its wants are. It tells you what its needs are, right? And this doesn't happen just like that. You may have to do it over a course of time. This is why hiring a coach and getting support is really crucial, because a lot of it's the accountability for doing this work. But as you renegotiate with that aspect of your psyche, right? Remember, psyche is soul, right? This is essentially soul work if we really get into it. You're able to bring that to the forefront, face it, acknowledge it, integrate it back into your psyche. And that is when you awaken to your divine potential. Your soul essentially awakens. This is soul work, right? And when we talk about to heal, it means to make whole, because when you're repressing, suppressing, and denying aspects of your psyche, you're not whole, you're not complete. And as you go through this process of working with the shadow, integrating your shadow and awakening the shadow, that's when you awaken to your truest potential, because you're no longer repressing, suppressing, and denying these aspects of your own psyche. And this is, like I said, it's like breaking free from the chains of your past, even generational, maybe multiple generations going back. Like if you had like great grandparents who lived through the Great Depression, they may have limiting beliefs around like wealth, and you can work with those limiting beliefs and shift them. And as you do that, you shift the emotional frequency, because it's really about working with those emotional frequencies. And as you shift that, then things begin to change in magical ways. And like I said, it's like you become your own wizard. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's still, I guess, very kind of ethereal and difficult. You know, when you say work with your shadow or introspection, I get the meaning of those things, but it's kind of hard for me to wrap my head around what that actually looks like in practice. Like, are you just kind of, once you clear space and become calm, just kind of addressing whatever comes up for you, or is there a certain place you can go, like, to dive more directly into it? Because, you know, introspection, well, there's a lot of complexity going on inside. You can think about all kinds of things, or memories, or, you know, like, where would you say to go mentally to start trying to find those roots that are so deeply buried and frankly trying not to be found?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's a little bit different for each person, but the key thing, like you said, it has to do with our memories, and it has to do with our roots. And specifically, what you're doing is you're recultivating a connection to your inner voice or your inner child. Another way of looking at shadow work is inner child work. So it's like, who were you before that traumatic experience occurred in your life? So it's like, one of the exercises that I teach is called the 3-2-1 process. And this is like talked about in lots of like therapy, coaching. The 3-2-1 process is just an example of this. Is you go into that space and you, like I said, it's pendulation. You go into the past but stay present. You work with the past but stay present. Okay. And the 3-2-1 process is, let's say you had like a traumatic experience where, I'll give you an example of a client I worked with years ago. I was coaching a teen. She was actually on suicide watch, and I'd been coaching her mother for a few years, and her mother really trusted me. So she sent her teenage daughter to work with me, because she was taking drugs, seeing therapists, nothing was working. And she trusted me enough to send me her daughter. And this is just when I was just beginning to get started into teaching this work. And so I worked with her in the 3-2-1 process. So she had been getting physically abused by her father. And what we did is, in terms of the 3-2-1 process, is I helped her to renegotiate. When we talked about negotiation process, renegotiating the story and the image she was holding on to in her unconscious around that abuse. So the way this worked for her, and like I said, I just kind of held her hand through the process, is in the 3-2-1 process, what you do is, like, oftentimes we're so addicted to like our story of the way something happened, and we are stuck in, I'm a victim, I'm just a victim. But then what we do is, by the 3-2-1 process, we look at the experience from third person. So like, you observe yourself being abused. Then you go to second person and you start to like kind of negotiate with them. But you're doing this in your unconscious. Like I said, it's your inner voice, your inner child. You ask this person, why are you doing this to me? Okay, so that's second person. And then first person, you actually become this person who is your abuser. And this is different for different people. You don't always want to dive into this until people are really ready to do this work. And then you renegotiate from third person, from yourself, and then from the actual person abusing you. And what this does is it changes the energy around the experience. And in doing so, this client that I worked with, she was able to realize that her father was abusive to her because her father had actually been sexually abused. And it didn't make it okay that she had been physically abused, but it helped her to understand. And in her unconscious, instead of it being this big image that was running her life from the unconscious, it was able to diminish the energy around that, because she had been attracting boys who were physically abusive to her. And this is in her own words, she was able to shift that because she shifted the story and the image that she was holding on to in her unconscious by applying the 3-2-1 process. So that's an example of how you renegotiate that, because the essence of this, and that's like truly the word, is the essence, is who you were before you were born into this world. That's your divine inner essence. And so as you rekindle this connection with your inner child, you're able to reconnect with that inner essence of who you are. And that sets you free from the stories the illusions, the delusions, and the unconscious material that's running your life, because it's really about shifting the energetic frequency around these experiences, and that's what sets you free. And that's just an example. Did that help you to express it a little bit better?
Totally. That makes a lot of sense. So it sounds like the idea is, first, in general, as with anything, it's so advantageous to to know yourself well, and to at least have identified some of those key points of where some of the traumas could have started from in certain traumatic experiences in your past. So once you've identified those, you can kind of revisit them and then reframe. I think that's kind of the key idea, if I'm getting that correct, is you're identifying, pinpointing those, going back and kind of almost re-experiencing them from different perspectives, and reframing the narrative or the story that you're telling yourself about that experience into a more empowering way, in a way that you can at least understand and allow yourself to actually process. And of course, try to feel those feelings as they're coming up. I'm sure that can be pretty intense experience. Sometimes a lot of things are going to come up when you're doing that work, and just allowing those feelings to come through you and be released in the process. Is that kind of like in a nutshell?
Yeah, essentially. I mean, like you're saying, because you're reframing it, because like when you start working with it, it's more unconscious. It's not like an image. That's why getting very grounded and calm is crucial, because when you begin to access that unconscious space, then, because sometimes people, like, they repress their memories so much they forget them, because it's like so traumatizing. So that's why being very calm and grounding yourself allows that inner voice to come in and be able to negotiate with it. Like here's another example, is that it's like imagine, like, we all know who Bruce Wayne is, Batman, right? So Bruce Wayne, his parents were killed when he was a child. Seriously traumatic experience. So when you're working with that inner child, imagine going into yourself and sitting there with a young Bruce Wayne who just had both of his parents killed. You can't go in there and be aggressive. You can't be very controlling. You have to be so much in your divine, feminine, nurturing space, because you're in that divine, nurturing space with yourself. And when you're in that space, you're negotiating with this like young Bruce Wayne and healing on its terms. When I say its terms, it's really your own terms, but it's your shadow's terms. And as you begin to reframe those experiences, that's what begins to set you free. So your past stays in your past, and it's not that unconscious rhetoric or blueprint where the map is not the territory, because you're able to actually navigate the present, here, now experience without this unconscious material actually running your life. And that's the part where it sets you free, because so many people in our society are walking around wounded because they're not allowing themselves to feel those emotions. And that's where so many people are struggling with their mental and emotional health, because they're wasting so much energy. We talked about, remember the three Dantians, Jing, Qi, and Shen. People are wasting their Qi, their life force energy, repressing all this energy, and it's actually causing physiological disease within their bodies. Versus when you actually face it, like, I'll give you another example. There's a story in a book called Dark Side of the Light Chasers by Debbie Ford. She said that when you don't face your emotional pain, it's like you're carrying a watermelon around with you and you're trying to hide it. So I'm like, I walk around, I'm like, oh, hey, Logan, what's going on? You're like, Ody, what's up? Like, what's that watermelon? I'm like, watermelon? I'm not carrying a watermelon. Everything's fine. I'm good. I'm good. I'm totally fine. And you're like, but Ody, I'm not carrying a watermelon. Everything is fine. You're making me angry. It's like once you actually go, oh, I'm carrying a watermelon, but you're carrying anger, you're carrying guilt, you're carrying shame, and you're carrying it around with you everywhere until you go, oh, I'm wasting all this energy carrying this watermelon around. Then you put it down, and that's an example of how free you are, because that's essentially where so many people are struggling with physiological health, because it starts to get embedded in their psyche. This is where they get poor posture. It's really affecting their nervous system. So when you actually begin to face it and put that stuff down, this is what I'm talking about. It sets you free in magical ways, because you actually get all that energy back that you were wasting carrying this watermelon around. That's why I love teaching this stuff, because it's literally like magic, because you're no longer wasting all this energy repressing, suppressing, and denying your emotional frequencies. And then you're a more whole and complete person, because able to feel the full spectrum of emotions and express yourself authentically. Like if you're repressing your anger, it can turn into rage, and then you have high blood pressure. Now you're getting sick. Now you're having heart disease. Versus if you actually acknowledge, oh, I have all this repressed anger. Like I said for myself, I had this anger. When I got into anger, it was really fear. When I got into fear, I found it was abandonment. And facing that set me free in such magical ways. I was able to love myself, and I was able to talk with my father about it, and healed my whole family. That's why I love teaching this stuff. It, like, literally, you heal your whole family. And my dad and I have had conversations about it. And so, like, I was able to help my father deal with some of his anger. Like my dad, his father died when he was 14. So he had a lot of anger around that. And so I realized I picked up on some of that anger. So being able to heal that anger has not only changed my life, but it's changed my family's life. And that's the work that I'm doing, teaching out other people, because it's a process. And as you go through the process, this is where, like I said, it sets you free from who you were to become who you were always meant to be. And that's the essence of shadow work.
Beautiful. Great way to tie that up there. And yeah, all that energy then that you were carrying that around is then freed up, that you can put towards things that are actually going to move you forward and not stay stuck in the past. So yeah, it's funny how it's like how liberating that can be once you recognize it and you put it down. You feel how much lighter you feel, and like you almost feel silly for how long you were carrying that damn watermelon around for so long. But it's all, like you said, it's all a process. So we just are where we are, and what matters is that you just start at some point, even if it's today. Don't worry about how long it's taken you, how long you've been carrying the watermelon. Just start and take it one day at a time, because it's a process. Nothing's gonna, it's not a magic pill. It's not gonna happen overnight anyways. Just make it a part of your lifestyle with that intention that you want to be better. You want to have a more free and enriched life, free of those the encumberment of all that crap that you've been carrying around. So love the conversation, Ody. It's been a pleasure. Tell the audience what you're up to and where they can find you.
So yeah, I want to touch on one last thing on what you just said. That oftentimes hidden within our trauma is the gold of who we are truly meant to be. And in Taoist alchemy, often people, when they actually face their inner trauma, they find what's called their Ming, which is their destiny. And many people, they're not on their true path in life. And this actually causes people to get sick and die younger than they should, because they're not on their true path. And sometimes, this isn't even my opinion, I read this in Taoist alchemy books, is that sometimes our soul makes us go through an experience to awaken us to who we're truly meant to be. And when you go through the process of shadow work, it actually helps you to discover who you truly are, because you finally become a whole and integrated human being. So I just want to touch on that last point.
It's that hero's journey. It's like it's
Joseph Campbell.
The process of the becoming is that actually makes you that great hero that is capable of slaying the dragon at the end. And without that journey, you would have never had that growth to become that person.
Yes, you're absolutely right. It is the hero's journey. Joseph Campbell, great book. And as like I said, that's where it's like alchemy. As you face those inner wounds, then you find the true gold that was always within you. And that's the beauty of this work, and why I'm so passionate about teaching it. But yeah, let me tell you a little bit about where you can find me. Check me out on Facebook. My full name is Ody Andreanos. You can find me on Instagram or TikTok. I do funny videos on Instagram and TikTok. And it's I am ODY1 Kenobi. I am OD1 Kenobi. I also have my book, Shadow Awakening, available on Amazon, The Dawn of Human Potential. And that just came out last month. And I also, if you go to my website, odysseymentorship.com, you can get access to my Shadow Hacker Initiation Package. You can set up a consultation with me if you want to learn more. I got my book. I have a video course. I have a 3 or 6 month coaching program. I also do retreats. So if you want to go deeper into this work, I really feel that a lot of healing happens out in nature. So I like to do 3 or 6 months of coaching with people. And then we actually do a weekend retreat where I can really dive deep with people to support them in their healing path. And yeah, man, I love this work. I feel that shadow work is one of the most important tools going forwards in terms of the awakening of humanity. And the more people we get doing this work, because when I coach people, I essentially coach people to become a coach. Not that they won't even want to become a coach, but you're able to teach this wisdom to other people, because that's when you've truly mastered something, is when you're able to teach it with other people. So that's essentially how I teach. I coach people in such a way that they can take the wisdom and share it with others, because that's how we do this stuff. It's you become like a drop in water, creating a ripple effect in the lives of everybody around you. And that's what's so powerful.
Very well said. Everyone, thank you for watching. Those links are down in the description. Do give this man a follow, consume his work. I've read his book personally and it's been very helpful to me. If you did get value from this video or you learned something, hopefully, give the video a like, and again, subscribe if you're on YouTube, or follow if you're on the podcast platforms. I'm so grateful for your viewership, and I hope that you got something out of this. We'll see you in the next video, but until then, be empowered, inspired, and encouraged.